I always wanted to make scrunchies for myself, but the methods I saw were a little complicated for me. Because of that, I came up with my own, and I personally think the method I share with you today is simple and it only includes very few steps too. Another plus point is you can make it as a two-tone scrunchie, and I truly hope you like this special addition as well. Now let's start with materials and tools. As usual, you'll need pins, a pair of scissors, and a sewing machine with a coordinating thread color. When it comes to fabric, you are going to need 2 fabric pieces, each measuring 11.5 by 4 inches in size. Since this is a two-tone scrunchie, I have selected 2 different cotton fabrics. I have cut 7 inches long elastic, and this one is half an inch wide elastic. Any elastic with a 1/4 inch to half an inch wide would do just fine. Now let's start sewing, and I'm going to start with the elastic. Place one end of the elastic on top of the other end in a circular motion, so you can make it into an elastic band for the scrunchie. Then we are going to sew the 2 edges together for a permanent band. Go to your sewing machine and carefully hold everything in place. Then start to sew 2 edges together just by making straight stitches on that area. Start with a little back stitch at the beginning. There is no particular way to do this, I'm just going to sew around that area. Stop the sewing when you think it's strong enough, and remember to do a little back stitch at the end too. Finally, trim all threads. As you can see, the elastic part is all done, and we can set that aside. Now let's move on to the next step. Place one fabric layer on top of the other fabric layer, and most importantly, make sure they are facing the right sides together. I have selected 2 printed fabrics so you can see things clearly. Now pin and place the 2 fabric layers together along one of the shorter sides like this. Next, we are going to sew along this line, leaving a half an inch seam allowance. You can also do the same with the other shorter side, but then it'll be a little difficult when ironing. Depending on that, you can choose which method you like, and don't worry, I'm going to show you how to do both ways. First, let's see how this one is going to go. Remove the pin and start to sew by doing a little back stitch at the beginning. As I mentioned earlier, leave a half an inch seam allowance. Sew straight, and as always, do a little back stitch to end the sewing. Finally, trim all threads. Now let's unfold the fabric, and as you can see, now we have one longer fabric piece instead of 2 shorter ones. Place the wrong side of the fabric facing up, and first start to press the seams apart. Then starting from one of the longer sides, fold the edge about half an inch towards you. Press it to keep the crease. Continue doing that from one end to the other. Since this is a longer area, I'm not sure hand pressing will do any good, so I recommend using an iron for this part. When you are done with that side, move to the opposite side and do the same with that side too. Fold half an inch and then press it to keep the crease like the way I do. At this point, both sides are folded along the edge. Then fold the entire fabric in half in a way that the right sides of the fabric facing each other. Now unfold the unsewn shorter side and make sure those 2 edges are aligned with each other. You can use a pin to keep things in place. Our next step is to sew along this line, leaving half an inch seam allowance. As I mentioned earlier in this video, you could have sewed 2 ends at the beginning too. The only reason I didn't do it there is then it'll be a little difficult to iron because of its shape. Otherwise, it'll be much easier to sew both ends at once. If you prefer sewing both ends at once, this is how we are going to press the two margins. Leave the wrong side of the fabric outside and then fold the margins about half an inch towards you. Now press it to keep the crease and continue folding and pressing all around the fabric. Make sure to open the seams at both ends while you are doing so. Even this way is not that difficult since this is not that much of a narrow space. It's totally up to you. As you can see now, both margins are nicely folded. This one is ready for the next step. Since we still have to sew the other end of the previous one, let's keep this aside for a moment. As I told you earlier, only unfold the two ends and then sew along the line. You might think, why can't you just sew it as it is in the folded manner? Yes, you can, but let me show you what happens then. This is the very first scrunchie I made, and I made that mistake here. If you observe clearly, this seam end looks a little messier compared to the other seam end. The reason for that is if you sew things folded, then those seams try to expose at those points while sewing. If you want your scrunchies to look more professional, make sure to unfold before sewing. Enough of that, and now let's start sewing along that line. Remove the pin and as always, start with a little back stitch at the beginning. Leave a half an inch seam allowance and sew straight. When you reach the other end, do a little back stitch to end the sewing. Finally, trim all threads. Now both ends are secured and you can press the seam open at that side too. Since we still got crease lines at both ends, now fold the unfolded parts again. After this point, we are one step away making our scrunchies. Take the elastic band and put it over the fabric band. For that, first gather the fabric band like the way I do and then place the elastic band in the middle of it. Now fold the fabric in half at any of the seam ends in a way that the two folded margins at both ends meet each other like this. Use a pin to keep it in place. After you did one seam end, move on to the other seam and again use a pin to keep everything in place. You only need to keep two folded margins aligned together and sew all the way around closer to the open end. It's the same with the other scrunchie. Let me show that too. Gather the fabric band and then place the elastic band over it. Leaving the elastic band in the middle, fold the fabric at one of the seam ends and pin it. Then move to the other seam end and pin that one too. As both scrunchies are ready to sew, let's start one by one. I'm sure now you know what happens next. We are going to sew around the scrunchie. Remove the pin and start to sew somewhere closer to one of the seam areas. As always, start to do a little back stitch at the beginning and make sure two folded ends are aligning each other throughout this step. I'm going to sew closer to the open end, which will be a 1/4 inch to less than a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Keep folding the two edges as you go and you don't need to rush things. Just take your time. I had a few questions when it came to making scrunchies. One is it needs a longer piece of fabric and sometimes we only have width, not the required length. But if you use this method, you can even merge two fabric layers of the same fabric and it doesn't have to be two-toned. I don't want you to get the wrong idea that this method is only for making two-tone scrunchies. My other problem was most of the methods require to use either ladder stitch or top stitch at the opening end. There is nothing wrong with that, but ladder stitch takes time and only doing top stitch at the opening area doesn't look that neat. Now this method doesn't need any of that and you can complete everything in one simple step. Only con of this method is that you will need to iron. As I said, it's up to you and this way of sewing is less complicated for me. Coming back to the project, when you reach the starting point, do a little back stitch to end the sewing. Finally, trim all threads. Could you believe we already got ourselves a beautiful two-tone scrunchie? It's that easy. I'm going to sew the other scrunchie as well and it's the same simple step. Sew all the way around closer to the open end. As we are reaching towards the holiday season later in the year, you can color match these scrunchies for Halloween, Thanksgiving or Christmas as well. I'm pretty sure these will be beautiful and useful handmade gifts. Now here is another idea. You can merge more than two fabric pieces to make it into a multicolor scrunchie. How about red, white and green for the Christmas and several fall colors for the fall? There is so much you can do as now you know the basic idea of making a two-tone scrunchie. Let me know if you would like to see one with multiple colors or designs. At this point, we are done making both scrunchies and I think my first attempt of making scrunchies went just fine. I can't wait to try these on and I would like to think now you all can't wait to make one too. Thank you for watching and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, let me know what you think of it and I'll join you in the next one.